Hey everybody, welcome back to Feedback Loop. I'm Joey.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this is season 2, episode 12, coming at you hot and live with this this new format that we're doing. Still 12 episodes in. Don't know how to start it.
Classic us, if there is such a thing as classic. I mean, we've been doing this for like 2 years, 2 years? 2 years
was
now, so.
I mean, we could essentially say this was like a lockdown project at this point, even though we started like a month before.
That's true.
So
yeah, we were starting as COVID
as the world was ending,
was washing over the world. And boy, what a good venture this has been. A worthwhile venture. We have made so much money. We're just sitting on bags of cash at this point.
It doesn't matter about the money, Jeremy. We've made so much content. This
so
great
much content. So it's about community. Anyways, we talk about music on this podcast sometimes. Occasionally, that is the intent of such a thing. This is episode 108 overall. Maybe we should just start fresh with season episodes. I think I'm gonna give it up finally. I know I've been resistant for figuring out season 2 episode numbers.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a turning point, and I'm throwing in the towel. So just this is the 108th episode, but it's season 2 episode 12.
Yeah. Now that we got that out of the way, what did you listen to this past fortnight, Jeremy?
Man, I don't know. I feel like I haven't listened to anything.
Oh my god.
But it's so weird. I don't know. I'm in a weird like headspace, I think, because I'm moving soon.
Yeah.
And sooner than I realize, honestly. Like it occasionally just hits me, and I'm panicking about how soon it is that I'll be driving across the country with
all your stuff.
Yeah. So that's fun. But last week I had a list of things that I wanted to check out, and I did, but I feel like I checked them out so like early in the cycle that I haven't like quote unquote been listening to them necessarily. So like I listened to Billy String's Home album, which is great bluegrass. He's a very talented guitarist and singer, but I wasn't really in like a bluegrassy mood.
Yeah.
So I listened to it while I was in the shower and then never again. There's one of them that's been constant pretty much the whole 2 weeks, the whole fortnight that we've been away. And this was something that I found immediately after recording our previous episode, which is an album called Valentine by an artist called Snail Mail. I was drawn in by the album art. It's one I sent you. Last week of it's a good, attractive album cover, I think, for me. It's just like a simple photo of the singer in like a nice like kind of pink suit top with some kind of ruffly undershirt kind of thing, and then
I want to wear that
a red background or whatever. But
yeah,
it came up from YouTube Music. They suggested it because I'd been listening to Soccer Mommy, and I think that's a good bridge to tie between those two artists because they are similar in ways. The album is good in kind of the opposite way, I think, of that Soccer Mommy album, because the Soccer Mommy album was a fun surprise, and it grew and it evolved throughout the album, whereas the Snail Mail album is very consistent most of the way through. Like it starts off delivering a sound and it keeps that sound, not in like a negative way. I know sometimes that does feel like a negative when there's not a lot of like variation, but it's just a very solid album, I think. So I've been listening to that most consistently over the past fortnight, and then a couple albums recently ish. One big one in particular stands out as something that I've been listening to in the past week.
Man, I feel like your one big one is something that I should have checked out but have not, because I just haven't been able to bring myself to do it.
Okay, so I guess we'll just. What else have you been listening to then, if not that one?
So for some reason, I mean, like hot off the tail end of our last episode, you talked about Billy Strings, which I knew I'd listened to some of him enough to know like what his sound was, and I listened to a little bit of him, but then I kind of fell back into Panopticon because that was like the bluegrass black metal, which then brought me back to None, the the band that we checked out an album of theirs,
Yeah.
and life has gone on long enough for all you people out there wondering what the album is. But
Feedback
yeah,
loop episode. Beep.
yeah, edit that in, Jeremy.
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll happen.
But yeah, like I listened to them, and that was just kind of where I was at. And then that kind of, for some reason, led me into a nostalgia for, like, I guess music that I listened to when I was probably between the ages of like 5 and 9, like 9 or 10, stuff that was on the radio when I would be like in the car going to like the Sellersburg pool with
Yeah.
my mom in the
The
middle of the day.
purest nostalgia.
Yeah, like it's just like, which I listened to like Third Eye Blind's self-titled album, which listening to it now, I'm like,
Yeah.
why was this a song that like was on the radio? Like a bunch of songs that were on the radio. I mean, I guess Jumper has a nice positive
Yeah.
message and everything, but then there's like How's It Gonna Be is kind of almost sad boy in a way, but then their big hit Semi Charmed Life is just about living a life as like a meth addict. But that
Yeah.
has some really solid like deep cuts on it. So
Yeah.
everybody out there, go listen to Third Eye Blind's self-titled album, which I then also started listening to a lot of Everclear, which, like, I don't know. That's just, those were like two big bands that were on the radio in like the late 90s, early 2000s, I guess.
Yeah.
And that for some reason, just like listening to that, it instantly puts me in like the seat behind the driver's seat in our minivan that we would ride to the pool in and then go to the Chinese takeout place like 4 times a week afterwards. And it was
Yeah.
just a very vivid memories.
So is that like because I've not listened to a lot of Everclear or Third Eye Blind, to be clear, but I think the comparable albums that I would have from that time of my life, I would consider kind of like comfort food albums.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's not something that I would acclaim, right? I wouldn't say that it's like god tier music or my favorite albums even, but listening to them is just kind of this blanket of like warmth and comfort for a time that was so like so innocent and so far in the past.
Yeah. I'm about the same. Like they're more like a weighted blanket wrapping around you. But not to discount either of those bands, because I mean,
For sure.
apparently they're both still active. Like,
Oh, really?
whenever I looked at Third Eye Blind on Spotify, they recently released an album. I think it was like an unplugged type of album, but they have tour dates. They're still playing shows. So I mean,
Good for them.
hats off to them. And they're not bad albums by any means. I mean, Third Eye Blind's self-titled album is honestly, front to back, better than I expected it to be. It's not like,
Interesting.
I mean, of course, it has their 3 biggest hits on it, but there's also some solid, like, deep cuts on it to keep you at least interested throughout the whole album. But yeah,
I'm going to add that to my list.
Definitely. It's good, solid, like late 90s radio rock sound. Like, I don't know how else to describe it other than that.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I am aware of Third Eye Blind and Everclear, and I know their songs, but I cannot, for the life of me, think that I ever heard them on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just not. I guess when I was of that age, most of the time was that I was listening to the radio was in the car with my parents, and my mother liked country music, so I got a lot of like Alan Jackson and stuff like that kind of country. And when my dad was driving and when he was picking songs, it was all classic rock.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of like that's where, and I feel like that's common for our area, perhaps, but there wasn't a lot of like modern music or modern pop or modern rock or definitely not hip hop.
Yeah.
Coming out
that never
of
happened.
our cars. So like, which is weird in that like I would consider Avril Lavigne's first album a very similar kind of nostalgia because that was 2003 ish. So I guess it's kind of on the tail end of what the age group that you were talking about. But like, I'm surprised that that is kind of a nostalgic album for me, just because it doesn't seem like something that my parents would be listening to. But I think my dad actually did enjoy it, and I guess at that age it was more like me and my cousins were hanging out and listening to music and stuff. But I don't know what like would hit the same way. I mean, I guess classic rock, like listening to Led Zeppelin and
Yeah.
whatever radio, classic rock and Queen and stuff would be similar, but I don't really feel nostalgia for that stuff. It's just good music, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
It still holds up incredibly well for me. So I don't know if I have something specifically like of that time period for me, because the radio music wasn't super interesting, or it still holds up for me.
Yeah. And this may just be like a my generation thing that happens with every generation, but I feel like that period of time produced so many like one hit wonders, even if they
Yeah.
had other hits. Because I mean, like Everclear had a lot of hits. Like they had at least like 5 or 6 big hits. Third Eye
Mhm.
Blind had like probably 3 or 4 big hits. But like there was like all those bands like Savage Garden or
Yeah.
like Three Doors Down, Marcy Playground. Like they had like their one big song that was on the
Yeah.
radio,
I
and it's
think
just
I think you'd upset a lot of people by putting Three Doors Down in that
no.
category.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're bad. I will definitely jam to some Three Doors Down, but like when you think about like
You
hits
think of
that get on
Kryptonite.
the radio. They have like a like I don't know. You think about Led Zeppelin, and it's just like whenever they were on the
Everything.
radio, hit after hit after hit.
Everything was a hit. Yeah.
Literally, their entire first 4 albums were just hits.
Yeah.
But it's because a lot of them were tried and true blues classics that they adopted into.
Well,
But you know,
adopted.
adopted. But they wrote rock versions of them. But
Sure.
they were hit after hit after hit, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff. Which I mean, maybe somebody who grew up in the '80s, '70s, they'll recognize the one hit wonders that they heard on the radio. But I feel like there was a very distinct sound between all of that, like the rock one
For
hit
sure.
wonders that came on the radio. That I don't know, like it's just something about that is it's different because like you said Led Zeppelin and a lot of classic rock that have held the test of time, you can listen to them as like actual music.
Right.
And this is going to sound like I'm bashing the music that I was talking about, and I'm not. But like maybe it's cuz I continued to listen to a lot of classic rock and stuff, and I dropped a lot of the late 90s music, but I've come back to it and it's like it's just held so pristine in this little time bubble where even older music, I can listen to music from the 40s and it feels
Yeah.
more relevant to what I would listen to right now
Agreed.
instead of that time bubble.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's very true, I think. And that, I guess part of that is, at least for 40s music, you weren't listening to that as a kid.
Yeah.
So at some point as you were growing up, you discovered it, presumably after you were listening to 90s radio rock. So even in
Yeah.
that aspect, it's newer to you, and therefore it feels more relevant. But yeah, that is kind of a fun, like, I guess, idiosyncrasy with how you experience time and music. And because I definitely agree with like the whole like 40s and 30s and all of that kind of like and like doo-wop and stuff, 50s, like all of that stuff feels more fresh than
Yeah.
a lot of like 90s radio rock and radio music that I don't really care for. But maybe this is just me realizing, not realizing, I guess, but voicing the fact that I don't really care for a lot of 90s music. I mean, 90s had a lot of good grunge for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, there's some great shit that happened from the 90s. But as far as like radio play, like especially around here, I cannot stand 90s like R&B and like boy bands, and the country music is not great for me either. And like, it's
Yeah.
just, I don't know, there's so much that just feels blah to me that none of it stands out. But like going deeper back, even though like a lot of the music from the 30s sounded very similar, people, there was kind of like defined, there was still a defined like pop, right, what people were into it. And so you could argue that it all also sounds bland relative to everything else that was happening. But I guess it would just be because we're holding it to different standards,
Yeah.
right? So we're able to be more critical of things that we have experienced in the moment that it happens. I guess, for better and worse. I mean, obviously, like you were saying, we're not necessarily shitting on those bands. We're not saying Third Eye Blind is a bad band or anything, but they're held to a different standard as Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
as a lot of like the Ink Spots and the Mills Brothers and stuff like that. They're because we can separate them
Yeah.
clearly from our own timeline to say like, no, like it was a different time back then, but it's harder to do that for music that we've experienced, I guess, recently, relatively.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very good point. Like, I'm sure people who were around whenever the Ink Spots and the Mills Brothers were in their heyday back in the day, they also probably have a lot of the similar sounding bands that
Right.
didn't stand the test of time, but they were like, yeah, that's what I listened to when I was a kid. And it's
Yeah.
like Led Zeppelin. I mean, you think about all of our dads and moms who lived through the 70s and grew up
Yeah.
in that time, and I'm sure they had all their bands that weren't Led Zeppelin or the Rolling
Yeah.
Stones or whatever
Yeah.
that we don't
They're B
nobody care.
bands.
Yeah, nobody cares about them anymore. And that's mean. Definitely, people definitely still care about them,
For
but
sure. For sure.
like they're not like the gods that the other bands
Right.
are.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is interesting that I think about. I don't want to say I think about it often, but I think about it in that there's not I feel like there's not a lot of that happening now, right? With
Yeah,
music that's coming out even since like the 2000s. There hasn't been a lot of like absolute pinnacle of music kind of bands that show up and make an impact like that. And maybe again it's just this kind of the fact that I'm living through it. I'm not able to notice it until like reflecting on it, but I couldn't name one quote unquote modern act that has had the kind of esteem and like has been placed on the same pedestal as like Led Zeppelin has, right?
yeah,
Maybe you could argue like hip hop and rap really took
yeah.
off in like the
Like Kendrick
90s and the early
Lamar,
2000s. Kendrick Lamar, he's huge, right?
Eminem
Eminem
in his
obviously
heyday.
he's a cultural icon for sure.
Yeah,
I just feel like that's still several layers below like how glamorized and how there were guitar gods aren't they're
yeah,
not like, that's not even a
yeah.
thing
The rock
anymore.
star
It
era,
feels,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
it feels totally different to me.
I agree. I definitely feel like there's a lot of bands now that have made such bands and artists. I'm not going to exclude like hip hop acts, rappers, whoever, pop artists. Uh, but I feel like there's a lot of people now that are doing more for music than I feel like, and this may be unfair because I once again didn't live through it, but people who are doing more for like the landscape of music now than people in the past did. Like, I feel like there's more innovation happening now than I feel like happened in like the era of like the 60s and 70s, which, don't get me wrong, when Black Sabbath came out with like
Yeah, that's what I'm sitting here
heavy metal,
thinking.
it's
Like
like,
there it's hard to judge it. I do completely understand what you're saying, where it feels like there's more innovation, more creativity, but like at the same time, without like if those things like Black Sabbath
yeah,
didn't come into fruition, like they at the time they were absolutely like revolutionary, right? The
yeah,
Beatles, right,
that's
was the
true.
biggest fucking music sensation of all fucking time, and their music, looking back on it, isn't super like we wouldn't consider that like super out there or like
Yeah,
creative or like shocking or anything because that's the ground level that everything else was built on, it seems.
yeah,
So like I think there is, to an extent, I understand in that like we having experienced everything previously in the music realm, right, has not you and I, we as a society,
yeah,
to be clear, and musicians and stuff, like there's so many building blocks that have been placed that is allowing us to reach higher heights and allowing us to kind of spread out more and deviate more from means, and technology is part of that, right?
yeah,
It's allowing us to get sounds and tones and stuff that we wouldn't previously, but like it's we have a foundation. A lot of classic music is kind of just the foundation on which modern artists are building from, and
Yeah.
so it kind of makes sense that we're just gonna keep pushing the boundaries as we advance through life, or until we all die, I guess, as a society and species.
That, yeah. Well, and plus, I guess that, like, there were a lot of people who in the past worked extremely fucking hard to get these out there sounds that
Yeah,
now you
true.
can just literally download a
You can
computer
download a
program and it
plugin.
does it.
Yeah.
Like, so forget that I said that. I guess I was just saying that now it seems like it's happening faster. Like,
For
more
sure.
innovation is happening in more directions, but we also have access to more music, more underground music that literally nobody outside of a basement would have heard. Like,
Right.
you have access to, like, your neighbor's kid's garage band on the internet now,
Yeah.
which you wouldn't have in the past. So we're just extremely lucky to be where we're at, I guess. And it's gone to my head.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a bigger discussion that maybe we shouldn't get into, but maybe in a future episode we can talk about. Maybe not. I feel like it's been talked about
Yeah,
enough, perhaps. But the fact that music is so accessible, how does that affect its value in the average person's day to day life, right?
yeah.
And I feel like that discussion's been had. Maybe we'll talk about it in the future, but that's something that kind of came into mind. I just realized we've been rambling a lot, which is good, but we don't want to make this a bit too long winded. The big album that we alluded to previously, that I'm assuming is we're on the same wavelength here, is
Yeah,
Beach Bunny's new album.
yeah. Hmm.
It came out this past Friday, as of this recording, and so you haven't had a chance to listen to it.
No, I don't know why, but every time I was about to, I just didn't. And then,
Interesting. Then I don't want to say anything. I do want to loop back to this as at some point after you've listened to it, because I feel like it's worth discussing at the very
okay,
least,
okay.
and I think that we could get some good conversation out of the album "Emotional Creature," which we were both looking forward to.
Yeah,
We're
I'm
both
very
fans of
much
Beach
looking
Bunny.
forward to it. I've just, some stuff at work was popping off recently, and
Yeah.
I've just been, there's a reason I've been looking to the past for comfort lately, and I felt like I was not in the headspace to
Yeah.
listen to something I had been looking forward to so much, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. You got to kind of keep yourself going before you can experience the good stuff to the fullest, I guess.
Yeah.
But coming up, actually tomorrow, as of this recording, is Friday. We're recording on Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday, New Music Day. I want to listen to the new Dance Gavin Dance album
Ooh.
that comes out, because I've never really listened to Dance Gavin Dance. Um, I know they have a very unique and like interesting style, and I've heard some of the singles from the new album, and I've always kind of, they've been on my radar and in the back of my mind of something that like I could potentially enjoy and want to check out. And they have a new album coming out tomorrow, and I've enjoyed some of the singles, so I think I'm gonna pull the trigger and become a Dance Gavin Dance boy for the
Nice.
weekend, and just kind of absorb all that and feel it in.
Well, hell yeah. On my horizon, of course, I have the Beach Bunny album. Um, but outside of that, I I want to listen to more of Burial, which is one of, I won't say he like necessarily like created dubstep or anything like the original dubstep, not like the Skrillex dubstep, because he didn't really
That's
create
okay.
it.
Let's be clear real quick. That's called bro step.
But yeah, okay, there we go. Good. I'm glad you made that distinction, because I would have had some really pissed off people in the comments like, you call that shit dubstep, which
Yeah,
no,
I'm one of
don't,
those people.
don't get me wrong, no, but but yeah, so Burial was kind of, he had the song Archangel, which I've been listening to his album Untrue a whole lot. He kind of took it to another level, I guess is what I'll say. He made it, it was just a very nice, not ambient, but it is an album that like takes you on on a journey, and it can put
Yeah,
you in the shoes of, I feel like it can put you in the shoes of somebody who's like experiencing what Burial himself experienced when he was writing it, like just like some loneliness, some gray skies, some like rainy nights and everything. out on the street working hard, and he has like a newer album, and I wanna listen to it. So
I might look him up because I've not listened to his music, and I like dubstep. I don't dislike bro step,
yeah,
as it is called, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like we've never really discussed a lot of like dubstep. I don't know what your general background is with dubstep in general, because like, I mean, obviously Skrillex was huge.
yeah.
I'm sure you listened to your fair share of Skrillex back in the day. But like as far as other things, I feel like that's not something that we've had the crossover between us on
Maybe,
as far as dubstep goes.
maybe we should, because I listened to a whole lot of just general electronic. I was subscribed to a
You listen to a
blog.
lot of like Monster Cat and stuff too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was
Which,
subscribed to a. Yeah, it's kind of. They do a lot of different like electronic genres and everything,
right.
and they have a big thing. But like Mr. Fiji Ouija, I was all about some
Mhm.
Mr. Fiji Ouija back in the day. I was subscribed to a blog called the Daily Wub, where they just put out like dubstep, loose air quotes whenever I say
Right.
dubstep
Yeah. I
remixes of
think that's
stuff.
also. I think that's probably why there's been not a lot of like crossover between us talking about dubstep, is because it's such a it has become such a vague
Yeah,
description of a sound, and there it obviously, especially kind of looping back to what you're talking about innovation, like there's been, because it's all computer generated sounds, like there's always something new and fresh, and there's so many different directions you can run with it, and there it's hard to tell, to draw the line and say when something is no longer quote unquote dubstep, or it needs to have a new subgenre
yeah,
created for it, I guess, because there's so much being produced, right? And
yeah.
obviously dubstep's not like as popular as it was in like the 2010s,
No,
but
oh my,
like,
it
or
was
even
everywhere.
before, it was fucking everywhere. But yeah, I think it's interesting that like it's such a blanket term, it feels now, and like even within music dubstep that I like, I feel like I was just having this discussion like yesterday, I think, about how Excision, which is one of my
Hmm.
favorite like dubstep artists, he's kind of he survived, quote unquote, the 2010s dubstep bro step kind of explosion,
Yeah,
and he stuck around. He kept doing what he was doing, and he kind of thrived after the whole bro step movement had moved on. He still
yeah,
had a reliable fan base, and he still kept doing what he wanted to do. And nowadays, I say, not even like
yeah,
5 years after what I'm talking about, I feel like he's getting to a point that, I mean, he has his own label now, and I think this is part of it. But I feel like a lot of his music is just kind of becoming homogenous, and there's not a lot that's like standing out
yeah.
from him. So I'm down to check out Burial for sure,
Hell
and
yeah.
I kind of want to hear some new fresh dubstep sounds, because I feel like Excision's kind of been flatlining on that for me.
Shit, dude, man. If we're going like, I don't know. I might, if depending on how you feel about Burial, I might have some other albums to throw out
Yeah, and
sometime.
depending on how I feel about Burial, I might have some other dubstep recs for you as well, just to kind of,
Yeah.
we can find each other's boundaries on this sort of thing. I don't fucking know. Do you have anything else you need to talk about this week?
Nah, man. I made us ramble for way too long. I'm sorry.
No, this was good. I enjoy rambling episodes much more than just checking off items on my list. I didn't have a lot anyway. Like
Yeah.
I said, that there wasn't a whole lot going on for me. I definitely want to follow up on the Beach Bunny album
Hell yeah.
next fortnight. So try to get some listening time into that. Obviously, don't force yourself into it, because that's not what this is about. Otherwise, I think in the next, maybe not the next episode, but the episode after, I might be in Washington.
That's gonna be fucking nuts, dude.
So I'll be recording from a different state, a different time zone,
The
a
you and
different
your
room.
webcam is gonna look like a Washington man.
I'm gonna have a full ass beard. I'm gonna be wearing a plaid button up shirt. I'm gonna
Goddamn.
lumberjack it or something, or be a hipster or whatever. I don't know. Stay in our feedback loop, guys.
Bye.